Hi everyone, welcome to CIS30A Introduction to Python Programming. My name is Casey Nguyen. I am your professor this winter session. And as you log on to Canvas to check out the course content, you will find the first module that contains our course information, our syllabus, textbook, which is optional. You don't need to buy the textbook. And therefore, I will include notes for the lesson in each module, my contact information and office hours. I do hold office hours even though it's not required. So in case if you have questions or concern, or if you have problems writing a program, you're welcome to stop by my office hours or send me an email to make an appointment. I also include some course resources. There are additional tutorials, as you know, available for Python on the internet, and some resources for certification in Python. And as we complete the assignments, it's best to use Office 365, which is freely available to you. So you can find the information to download Office 365 on this page. You will need to use your school email to log in. I also include our course plan, which gives you an overview of what you need to be doing weekly. And this is subject to change. I also include the dates and some of the activities that we will be doing. So you will find this in the course plan weekly schedule. And also in every module, I will also include a to-do list, which gives you a summary of what you need to do. Now, if you have questions that you wanted to post so that way everybody can see the answer, you can post the reply here. I occasionally will check this and I will respond. If it needs immediate attention, I recommend that you send a Canvas message or an email to me. I usually respond promptly or within 24 hours. So for week 1, what we'll be doing is we are to check the to-do list, and we will need to complete the necessary assignments in the to-do list. Then I require that you post a discussion. So in the discussion thread, after you watch the video, you will go ahead and click reply and respond to these questions. In addition to that, you're required to reply to 2 classmates, and you can do it throughout the week. And I will go in and review your posts as it will be graded for week 1. So in this week, we're going to touch on just a little bit about Python history, what it's used for, what kind of IDE you'll be using, and also how to install packages for Python and completing the lab. Now, I posted a page on using IDE. You're welcome to use any of the IDE that outside of idle, which comes with the Python packages that you will install. There are optional IDE. Now, the nice things about using IDE in that it has the editor where you can write your script and you can run your code using the interpreter that's incorporated with the IDE. If you're using idle, you will see that there will be the shell, which will be shown first, and you have to open a new file and write your script and save it as a .py file. So I will walk you through that a little bit further down the line when I talk about lab exercises. So here are some of the optional IDE. Now, if you wanted to use online interpreter, you can, such as REPL, ProgramMiz. They do have options for Python interpreter. However, the challenge with this is that sometimes these interpreters have the modules or the libraries that's incorporated where other IDEs do not, and you need to know how to install packages that would be used for Python libraries. Down the line, you will also learn how to create your custom module so that way you can incorporate that with your program. So yes, you can use online interpreter. However, I recommend that you select an IDE of your choice and be able to use it. And one of the things that you need to look for in an IDE is that it needs to be user-friendly, of course, but it needs to have a good debugging library. So that way it will highlight the text that you need to correct, or the things, it will give you the appropriate error messages, etc. So that's important to look for. In my preference, I usually use Tawny outside of idle. So this is a fairly light IDE. It's easy to use, and I've used it in Raspberry Pi and other platforms, so I prefer to use Tawny. Now, if you like Visual Studio, your option would be using Visual Studio Code with the Python packages. So with that, you have different options in IDE, and it would be your choice. I don't require a specific IDE, but I will demonstrate using Tawny or idle. So for week 1, I will begin talking about Python variables, types, operators, and methods. And then I will also add videos for the lab. And you can find the notes on this page in week 1 module. So once you click on that page, you will be able to view it inside the page or actually download the notes. So just a little bit of background on Python. Very similar to C++ and Java, you will see that there's some similarity. However, Python was created by Dr. Guido van Rossum to make it more developer friendly, easier to write programs. There are a lot of different libraries that are available for Python for different purposes. So really, the emphasis behind Python is that it has code readability, and so that way it would be more user-friendly as you learn to write Python script. It is an object-oriented type of language in which you will incorporate object within class, which we will learn later on in this session. So for the use of Python, Python is widely used across. You can be a backend developer if you know Python. You can create apps using Python for cross-platform, meaning Windows, Mac OS. You can also use it for big data. It's widely used in data analysis. Now, as you know that all the businesses are using data to learn about customer spending habits, different areas of their businesses. So Python is an essential tool in development. And you can also use this to create system scripts. So in security, Python is used for scripting, and we can use it for automation. We can use it for ethical hacking. So as you can see, there's a lot of functionality we can tap into via Python. And for those of you who are interested in artificial intelligence, Python development is also used in AI. So as we go through, and you will find that Python is very beneficial because it's very easy to use, very close to the simple English language. So it's very easy for beginners to learn Python. There's no real hard rules. You can simplify your program compared to other languages. It's easy to manage errors, and the syntax is very simple. It's portable, as you can incorporate or write your program for different OSs. So as you can see, there are great benefits in learning Python, and it gives you the versatility in development. And as you seek for jobs in Python development, you can see that there are great jobs with great salaries, right? And it's highly demanded. So there are a lot of jobs that require Python. So for example, this one, you can also look at specific areas of Python that you want to get into. So as you can see, This is a job in Irvine. Of course, with some experience, that will be $100,000 per year. So 3+ years of Python. So to begin, we will start with the very basic, and we can move forward and gain more knowledge and experience in writing our Python programs. Now, like all the other languages, the programming is really a process in taking an equation or incorporating algorithm into your code, so we can implement it, and so the computer will take your code and convert that to the machine level. Now, unlike C++ or Java, Python uses interpreter. So it goes through each line of your code or script and interpret each line. It doesn't have to be compiled like C++ or Java. With C++ or Java program, the entire program needs to be compiled first before it runs, whereas Python, we can have it read through each line, and as it comes across error, it will stop at the line that would have error. So you don't have to compile the entire program in Python before it is ran. Now, your source code is going to be the code of your program, and in Python we would save that with our program name, and the file extension is .py. So the commands in your code is known as statements, and that will be each of the lines. So we can have statements for specific things. Sometimes we would use control statements for conditions. Other times we would just have statements that would declare a container like a variable or a list, and we will go over that soon. So what happens is, after you write your code, the computer would take your code and convert it into to the machine language, which is in 0 and 1s, into binary. And from there, it's going to be able to execute the instruction that you incorporated in your code. For the final exam, you need to know the functionality of the compiler compared to the interpreter. As I mentioned earlier, Python uses interpreter instead of a compiler. So in C++ or Java, those languages uses compiler, which translates and interprets the entire source code into the machine language, and then it will execute the instruction at the machine level. So it needs to compile the program, and then it will execute. Whereas the interpreter, it simply translate the code line by line and execute it line by line. So it doesn't need to have the entire program compile, right? So Python doesn't need to do that. So it converts the Python program line by line to immediate code, and then the machine language for execution. And that's the difference between Python and C++. Now, in Python, it doesn't require a strongly data type. So as we work with variables, we don't have to specify the type. However, you would be able to parse it into specific data type. So what do we mean by type? We would want to specify the type of data, like integer for whole number, float for decimal numbers, string for our text. So dynamically typed language, it would be able to check it on the fly during execution, and that's what Python does. So it is a dynamically typed language where it would be able to check it on the fly. And as you assign values to the container, like variable or list, it would refer to what values that you're using to be able to check it for execution. Okay, compared to C++ or Java. Now, but in the back, you also see that Python can be statically typed and strongly typed as well, where we can parse it to a specific type. We can specify that a container would contain different type of data like integer or string, and another language that is loosely typed, that will be JavaScript. So the example that you see in your note here, we have price is a variable, and this simply is a name or an identifier that we give to a specific location of memory that would store our value. So price is our variable, and the variable name is price, and it is assigned 12 as the value. And as you can see here, 12 is a whole number, as we don't need to specify integer in front of price. We simply give it a name and we assign it a value, and it would be automatically check it. So when we use it throughout our program, it would be able to know the type of data that we're using. Another one here in this example is myString, which is a different variable. And myString is assigned some text here plus price. So what will happen is it will take 12 and plug it in here as it append after the text that we give it. Okay, so this is a simple example on how we don't have to specify the data type for Python. Now, as you look at some of the organizations that uses Python, some of the well-known companies are YouTube, Mozilla, Dropbox, Google, and so many more. So as you look for work, if you're looking for specific tech companies, you can look into these organizations, and IBM, HP. So there are so many companies that are currently hiring Python developer, or they require their developer to know how to write in Python. So for Python programming, what do you need? You need to have a text editor to write your program, and that's what's used to write. Can I write this in Notepad? Sure. That is a text editor in Windows operating system. You can use any text editor to write your program, as long as you save your program with the .py extension. Now, if you're using an IDE, you would use the text editor part of the IDE to write your program. So for example, if I'm using IDE like Tani, what I would do is when I open up the application, it will provide me with the space to be able to write a program. So for example, this is the program, okay, that a student has submitted. So if I wanted to write a program, I would open a new file and I can write my program. And adding the appropriate statements. Once I'm done, I will go ahead and click File, Save As, and I can give my program a name and click Save. Okay, so I would need to have the text editor to write my program, and as with Python, you need to have an interpreter to run the program. So if you're using idle, you will see that your program will output into shell, and you can execute specific statement in shell as well. So after you install your Python packages, you can open up your idle And the first thing that you will see is your shell. Okay. And you would know that it's shell when you see the 3 arrows. So a good thing that you can use in idle is you can use the help option, and you should be able to have references for specific areas. So if you don't know how to create a list, you can use the help option. Now in idle, what we can do is we can also create a new file. So after you click on File and New, what you will have is your editor, and you can start writing your program there. So you can have a variable, and you can make it a string, and you can print. So you can have a method, you can add in other statements. Once you're done, you can go ahead and click File, Save As. And we can save this onto a location where we can find it. And we can say, give it a name, and make sure that you have a .py extension so that way it knows that it is a Python file. Now this is after you would install Python. Okay. So third, that will be your Python packages. Now in lab 1, I have written down thorough instructions for how to install Python packages in different operating systems, Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. So if you're using Chrome, you would refer to the Linux portion. So now you can install a lot of different packages from command line. However, if you're more familiar with the graphical user interface, you would refer to lab 1, the first exercise, to be able to follow the instruction to download. You will visit the website. Okay. Now, real quick, so what you can do is you can go and open up, you can simply search for Python download. And here it will take you to python.org download. So as of this semester, what we have is we have the 3.9.1. You can use 3.8. We do not use the 2.7 or any releases in 2s because they are no longer supported. So I would accept 3.8 or 3.9. If you have 3.7, that's okay. You can update it to the latest version if you like. So if you're using Windows environment, you can download for Windows. If you're using Linux, you can download it here, or use the command line to do apt-get install update, and it will update the version for the Linux because most Linux releases would have Python installed. And then also for your Mac OS. So depending on the operating system, you can click the link. So I'm using Windows operating system. I can click here, and what I can do is I can scroll down and selecting the right bit options. I normally would go for the installer. So in this case, we would be able to download the 64-bit as I have a 64-bit processor. And here I would have the packages. So once you have downloaded it, what you would do is you would open it, and then you would be able to go through the installation process. And as Windows Firewall asks me if I want to install this, I'm going to go ahead and click install anyway. And so as I have a 3.8.7 version already installed, it's going to prompt me to do an upgrade. But if you don't have a prior version installed, it's going to give you the wizard, and you would follow the wizard as is instructed in Lab 1. So I recommend looking at Lab 1, Exercise 1 for different parts, depending on the operating system that you're using, to be able to do that. So if I want to upgrade this, I can simply click Upgrade, and it would upgrade the libraries I currently have from 3.8.7 to 3.9.1, or to the releases that I chose. So as you can see, you can download and install the Python packages. So you will be able to have idle, which is equipped to write your program and run your program. That's the equipped IDE. Okay. If you choose other IDE, you have to go and download the other IDEs, and some of the IDE would require specific setup. So make sure that you read the documentation before you attempt specific IDE. Okay. Now, a way that we can check to see if there's Python in your system or in your computer that has already installed, we can use our command prompt that's in Windows, or command line or terminal in Mac OS and Linux. And here I put down the instructions for you to see if there's Python installed on your system. And again, we don't want to use the 2.x version. We wanted to use Python 3 and 3.8 and up. Okay. So there's some details on how you can set up environment variables if you forgot to click the options in the installation. So that way it would link to idle for Python packages. And also in my notes, I share the steps on how to download and install Python, so you can refer to page 3 of your notes for different operating systems. And again, it's also in Lab 1. So as idle is the default IDE, the equipped IDE with the Python packages, I wanted to show you a little bit of the options with idle. So to open it, you can simply search for idle. And once you open up the application, the first thing you see is the shell. And it tells you shell and the version at the top. Then what you can do is you can go ahead and click File, New File, to open up your text editor to write your program. Now if you're using your IDE, like I said, like Tawny, you can simply open a new file and be able to write. Once you're done, make sure you save it as a .py extension. Now also in shell, we can actually run this with statements. So let's say I can simply do 2 plus 3, and it's going to give me the output as 5. And you can run some of the specific statement or commands directly in shell. Okay. And you can also configure it by clicking options and configure idle. What this will do is it's allowing you to change the settings. So if you wanted to change the font, the size of your font, let's say if I want larger size, I can increase the font to be larger or smaller, depending. If it's larger, maybe I can see better with it. So the options and the settings in idle, configure the settings. You can change the options on how you want highlight for specific things, and how your text to look when you write your program, and how your error to appear. So you can customize this And all of this, what you would find from idle is in options, configure idle, and you will be able to change the font and the options there. Okay, and then if you don't know, you can also click help, and in shell what you can do is you can find help option, and it will tell you here type help with the brace, and this would give you the help tutorial, the help utility in Python. So you can use something like the keywords. So if I'm looking for things like modules, like the example is giving, it's going to take a little bit, but it's going to give me some of the information that's available for the module. So within the packages itself, there's help utility for you to access to be able to find different topics that would relate to that specific keyword. Okay, so again, I'm using shell to be able to do that. Okay, now after you go through and it walks you through on how to use idle and how to write your program and run your program specifically in idle. Now if you're using IDE, after you create your program, you simply click run or click on the run menu and select run program. So some of the features that's really easy to see, right? What you want in an IDE is that it needs to have some highlighting features for your syntax, reserve keywords that would highlight literal text, and we can also include comments. So comments are annotations in which the interpreter would ignore. It's a note that we want to include in our program just to be able to give yourself some kind of notification for that specific part, for the certain functionality, and we don't have to comment every line. And for Python, you can use triple quotation marks to do a block comment, or you can use the hashtag to do a single comment. So if I wanted to put a comment here, I can use the hashtag and I can say declare variable. So this will be ignored by the interpreter. So for a single line, we would use the hashtag. For the multi-line, for a block comment, you can use triple quotation mark, or you can use triple single quotation mark, and it would know that it would be a multi-line comment. So included with your notes, there's details about idle, how to use idle, what is an IDE, integrated development environment, which is used for programming to write and run program. Now sometimes you will come across errors, and that's common when we write our program, and most of the time for beginners that will be syntax error. So syntax is a set of guidelines that needs to be followed in order to write correct computer language. Very much like grammar in English. When we write a sentence, we would have a noun, a verb to really structure that sentence, and we would finish out that sentence with a period. Very much like that in programming. We want to follow the rules to write a specific way, so that way it would be correct. So when you come across a syntax error, it could be that it's missing something, or something is typed in incorrectly. There's a mistake in a certain part of your statement. It could be that there would be a misspelled words or missing a closing bracket. So when you have syntax error, it will the trace back on shell, or when you run the program, it will tell you that it would be a syntax error at that specific line. So what you will have to do is you have to go to that line and correct the error by fixing the misspelled keywords or adding the certain symbol or the brackets. So that's important for us to look for. Now it's the interpreter job is it needs to go through each line and execute each line. So when it comes across a syntax error, once it detects that, it will stop and notify you, and you would see that in the shell. So you would get a message on your screen and it won't execute because it stops at that error. So here are some of the common causes for the syntax error. So make sure that you check. It could be that there's wrongly written keywords, wrong operator being used, missing parentheses or brace, curly brace, not putting appropriate strings, etc. So we want to check for those. Now other times you might have a runtime error, and this occurs when the code is stopped because the operation is impossible to carry out. So the interpreter won't be able to translate that, so it would give you a message for the error. And this type of error is a little bit more difficult to detect. So what you have to do is you have to go through your program and look for the area, right? Look at that area that would cause the error and fix. And a lot of the times it could be that it would be running out of memory, or if you're trying to divide by 0, that would be some example for the runtime error. Okay. Another type of error is the logical error, and this occurs when the code produces wrong result. So it would prevent your program from doing what it's supposed to do. There would be no warning or no message. So what you have to do is you have to go through and review your program to find out where that error occurs, and so that way you can fix it. So it is important that we debug that, and we would find the area of the error and be able to correct that in the statement. Next, I'm going to talk about strings. So strings are it is a type for us to use text values. It is a collection of characters, not words or letters, and it is used with a single or double quotation marks. So as you saw earlier, right, we can have a variable called name, and we want it to contain strings, so I can use a single quotation mark or I can use a double quotation mark. And so now if I wanted to print this, I can simply print using the print method, and in the parameter of that method I would use the variable, which is name, and be able to do that. So when I run this, it's going to ask me to save. So when I run this, it's going to print out the name or the text, the string that I assigned to that variable. So Casey here is enclosed in the double quotation marks. This represents the text or string. So this will be our string, and it's assigned to the variable called name. And I can have another variable like last name, and I can assign it a different string. When is my last name? Okay. Then next I will be able to use the print method to go ahead and print out my last name. And I'm going to go ahead and click save and run, or click run and it automatically save. So as you can see here, it shows me that Casey is the first print that I have, and when is the second display instruction for the last name. So we often use string to display our text in the program. We can print from a variable or simply the string itself. I can have it where it would be print I am a professor, and it will be able to print that. As you can see here, it would execute that perfectly using the print method. So inside the parameter for the print method, I can simply include a string. Next, I'm going to talk about data types for numbers. So we have integers that can be positive or negative whole numbers. Example 12, 400, 100, negative 65, 1,000. So any whole number can be under the integer data type. Float, that will be real numbers that has decimal points, and we would use float for things like prices. Percentage could be like tax in the program. For example, that will be 8.79, 100.00, $1.99. That will be considered float. Long, that will be integers of unlimited size. So what this will be is that the allocation of the storage for long data type will be larger. So that way it would hold larger numbers, and it could be positive or negative. It could also hold the way that we write these integers, that will be following with the L, either in upper or lowercase, to indicate that it's a long number. Another type would be complex number, and this is for the real part of the number is really the part A, which is the first part right here for the form. And often you would see that it would follow by the lowercase j or the uppercase j. It's not commonly used in Python programming, but it is available as a data type. And so when you have mixed types, sometimes we want to convert a number into string or string into number. What we have to do is we have to convert the numbers internally using an expression. Okay, so for example, as you can see on page 7, we would have the type. We have to specify the type, int x. We can convert that into the plain integer for x. So when you specify the type, what you can do is you can use that for the conversion of that specific value. Okay. Another type that you would see is going to be Boolean or bool. and that is when we would have two values, true or false. So in this example, 2 is less than 4, it's going to give you true. Or we can say 4 is greater than 2, and it's going to give you true. So the way that we would test this is if we run it in shell, and we can say 2 is less than 4, we would see that it's going to output true, and this would be a bool type. Or we can say 2 is greater than 4, it's going to give us false, because that's a false statement. So this is a bool type. Another type that you would see, and we would touch on this in the next week, is going to be list. So list is comparable to array in C++ or Java. A list is a larger container that it can contain objects and values such as days of the week, a group of numbers, a group of names. So in this example, we have a list called week. And inside this list, we have different days: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we would enclose these days with the square brace. So when you see the square brace in Python, that would be indicated it's a list type. And with that, we can incorporate a group of objects or a group of values. We would store the data within the square brackets. So when we use variable, we can only store not a group of objects like list, but we can store one object or one value. For example, name, we can assign it Marcos. Now in a list, we would say names, and we would use the square bracket, and we would say Marcos, Mary, Jane, Peter, etc. And another variable here is age, 23. So here we simply give it a name, and we give it a value. Now, can I have a variable that would use numbers? Yes, but you need to start it with letters, upper, lowercase. You can follow it by an underscore, and you can add in other letters or numbers, such as here I use last underscore name. I can also have a variable var1 or var1, and I can have like this. I can also have var1, var2, 1, 6, 8, like this. So as you can see, you can name your variable, and it needs to be unique as you assign it specific value. So make sure that we know how to name our variable, or the naming convention for our identifier, such as a variable. Here there's some example. You will see that on the quiz and on the final, there will be questions that would relate to this. Okay. Now, often by practice, we want to use descriptive name that will be useful in our program, a meaningful name. So when you create a name for your variable, you think of a name for your variable, you need to think about what is your program goals, what's the purpose of that program, what is the purpose of that variable in that program. That's very important. And often we want it to be visible, easy to see. So readability is very important. For example, we wanted to do total cost like this, so that way it's easy for us to see. Instead of using all capitalized letter, we can use total as lowercase underscore cost. So more on the practice side, that we wanted to make sure that there's readability, and it needs to be meaningful to the goal of your program. So that's important. So here there's some example for you to refer to on how to create a variable like first name is Carla, last name is Dominguez, as we assign those strings. And then we can print out, and in the parameter you can have first name, comma, last name, and that comma right here, all that is it's a separator. It separates one variable with the next variable. Or you can have it concatenate using the plus sign. So if I do print first name plus last name, all I'm doing is there's concatenation. So it would concatenate those strings together where it removes the space. In compared to if you're using the separator, it would add that space between one variable and the next variable. Okay. So we can also assign it a value like 0, and we can have it output a specific way depending on what our program is designed to do. So when you're thinking about your variable name, we wanted to meet the objective of our program, and how we assign the variable is important. What are we using the variable for? What it should contain? And all it is a location in the memory where it's going to store the value of assignment. We can have it formatted with the string. So in the case where if we needed to have it formatted, we would use the F to format the string. So that way it would be shown a specific way. So I will go more in details about this throughout the weeks on how to use formatted string. And we will have 1 week where we would focus a little bit more on string slicing, and the details in using string object. So far we talked about having print as the output for text. What if I wanted the user to input, and Python has a built-in function or method called input? And that way we can store the user input to that container or that variable. So I can have a program to ask for the username. So we can have customer name is our variable, and we can have them input So for our program, we can have it to be input. So we would have customer name is a variable, and here we would have input, and we can have a string called enter your name. And we would use the input method this way. Now we can have a second statement called customer age. And again, we can use the input method. And here we can say enter your age. So when we run this program, we first have to save it. and I call it customer info and make sure we have a .py extension. Click save. Then we're going to go ahead and click run. So here, as you can see, that it asks me enter your name. I'm going to go ahead and put Casey, enter your age, and that will be the end of my program. So what it will do is it will take the name that the user input, it would store it in the customer name, and it would take the age that I enter, which is 42, and it would store it in the customer age. Now we can add more to this by doing a print customer name, and again we would do a print customer age to verify. So we would go ahead and click save and run, and to test we will put in the name and the age, and here it printed what we entered. Casey is for the name and 42 is for the age. So that covers how we can declare a variable and use that variable to store the user input, and we simply use the input method. And inside the parameter here we would include the string that we want to prompt to the user, or any instruction that you wanted to provide to the user, so that way they can enter the correct information. And from there we would use the print method, and we would use the variable inside the print method parameter to be able to append whatever the user enter as the output. So as we finished this program, we saw that it prompted the user to enter the name and then enter the age. As the user does that, next it would print the name that they entered and the age that they entered. And the print doesn't take place until the user has keyed in the value and press enter. So it would wait for that. So input would wait for the key in and the enter key to be pressed. Next, I'm going to talk about methods for numbers in Python. To start, we would begin with absolute value. And as you know, Python can be used in data analysis, so it's important that we know how to use some of the built-in methods for numbers. So to start with the absolute value, so abs method returns the absolute value for the number. So in this example, I have my variable is assigned -4, and I wanted to use the abs method and simply have my variable as the parameter for abs method, and so it would output +4, as it would change the -4 into +4 with the abs function or method. So to write that, you can create a variable. So we can have, let's say, var1, and let's say that I give this -500, and I wanted to use abs var1. So with this, it would take the -500 and change that to a positive value as we implemented abs method in our program. And so here we can call this absolute.py. Now, if we wanted to verify so we can see, we would go ahead and print, and then we can pass the abs. So in the example here, if you do it this way, you won't be able to see as you saw in my program. What we have to do is we can print out the abs like this and be able to see the positive value. So you can use a method inside another method. So we would have absolute value of var1, which is negative 500, and we would print that out, which gives us positive 500. Next, I'm going to talk about ceil, which is a built-in method for Python, and this would return the ceiling value for the number, so it would round it up. So in this example, you see that we need to import math, unlike the abs method, which does not require the math library. For this one, in rounding, we need to import math. So what this will do is it will import the math library or the math module for Python, so that way we would be able to use this. And as you use the ceil method, you have to also include the math library in front of that. So here we would have math.ceil, and we would use the variable inside the parameter. So here is the program. I have import math at the top. This is going to give us math library. And my variable I declare it as my var. I have a value 4.879. This is the assigned value to my variable called my var. And what I did here is that I wanted to round it up. So I would have math.ceil, and then for the parameter inside the parentheses, I would put my var. Then I can print to display the value after it has processed the method. So after we implemented the ceil here, what you see is it rounded 4.879 to a whole number, which is 5. Now I can also change this value. So let's say that I wanted to change this to 24.3692, and I would rerun this program. So this value, my var is reassigned to 24.3692. So after we use ceil method with our variable, we have our output as 25, as it rounded this value to the next whole number, which is 25. So you will see in lab 1 that it would require you to use these built-in methods for numbers. The exercise required that you would use ceil, floor, round, abs, and various methods that's discussed in the notes and also in the lab itself. So in the next part, I'm going to talk about floor. And floor returns the value of the number. So in this case, we have an example. First, again, we would import math to incorporate the math library for Python. Then our variable is fruit price, and the fruit price is $4.56. Then we wanted to use floor to round it down to the previous whole number. So once I have the program written, in order to display it, I would use the print method. And inside the print method, I would have math.floor, and its parameter is going to be my variable fruit price. When I run this program, I simply give it a name, save it as a .py file, a Python file. When I run it, it's going to give me the whole number, which is 4. Now, what if we change this? What if our fruit price is $1.29? when we save and run it, it would round 1.29 down to 1, which is it round down, so that would be the prior whole number, which is 1 before 129. So as you can see, floor returns the floor value of the number, so it rounds down. Now, what if we wanted to use round method? So round method rounds off the given digits and returns a floating point number. If no number of the digits is provided of the round off, it rounds off the number to the nearest integer. So in our example, again, we will import math. In this example, we have a variable called fruit weight, and our fruit weight is 11.6792. We want to display the rounded fruit weight to 2 decimal. So the second part of the parameter here after the comma is going to be how many decimal you want it to round. So if you wanted 3 decimal, then you would use 3. So the output for this is going to be 11.68 as we round it down to 2 decimal, 2 points after the period. Okay. So that would be the round. So the round give us more flexibility in how we want the number to be rounded. Whereas floor and seal, it either round up and round down, and it would give you the integer, which is whole number. Also in lab 1, you're required to use max and min method. And these are the built-in methods in Python. We can use max method to return the largest value in the set of numbers. So when you have something like a list, a group of numbers in a container, we can determine the highest value by using the max method, which is already built in. So in the example, my list is the name for the list that I created. This is the name, the identifier for my container. And you know it's a list because it's the square brace. And in this, I have 10, 50, 20, 80, and 30. They are not in any order. And so what I wanted to do is I have a second variable. The next variable is highest value. And this variable, I wanted to store the maximum value from my list. So it needs to select the highest value from that list and put it into highest value. Then I wanted to print it. So in this program, after it's ran, it's going to give me 80 because 80 is the highest value from that list. And it's going to put it into the highest value variable. And that way we can print it. Okay, so max is going to give you, it's going to return the largest value of the set of numbers. Now for the min is the opposite. It's going to return the smallest value in that group of numbers. So in this example, I have a list called numList, and it's assigned 3, 5, 9, 11, 2, and 4. So by looking at this, we know that 2 is the lowest value. So I have a lowest value variable declared, and it's going to store the minimum value from that num list. And then we print it. So after this program is ran, it's going to output 2 because 2 is the lowest value in that group of numbers. Python also have a method called sum. what it does is it adds up all the items of an iterable and return the sum. So something like a list, it can iterate through and total everything up, and it's going to give it, we can have it print the total. So when you use sum method, all that is it's going to add up all the items in that group. And we want it to display text, then we can use the print method to show that total. So you wanted to specify, if you wanted to use the second part of the parameter, you can specify where you want to start. What if I don't want to total everything? What if I wanted to total at a certain point in a list? It would also allow you to do that. So what will happen is, in this example, we have val is a list, and it stores 1, 2, 6, 3, and 4. We then have it print the sum of that list. So what it does is it adds up 1 plus 2 plus 6 plus 3 plus 4, and then it's going to show that, which gives us 16. On the next statement, we have it print the sum of that list with 9. So we would start with 9, and then since 9 was not originally in that list, it's going to include that. Add it with all the values in that list. It's going to give you 25 as the output. So sum is very useful, especially when we work with a group of values. We can use the built-in method to add up all the items in that container. And you will also see this in the lab and possibly in your quiz or future exam. Next, I'm going to talk about using POW, or the power method. This allows us to return the power of x to y, as x to y is inside the parameter for that method. So this is a way that we can implement Exponent in our program. POW x comma y is really equal to x to the power of y. So we can simply have it print POW 3 comma 2. That just means that we have 3 to the second power, which gives us 9. So if I wanted to have a program that I wanted to print, and we would have POW 4 to the 5th power, then I can simply do this. And if you're using idle, you can put that into shell POW 4 comma 5, and it should be able to give you the output. But if you wanted to write it in editor, then we would have to save the file and then be able to run that. So here we can do save as, and we can say so at this point we would have the output 1024 as 4 to the 5th would be 1024. Or we can have it print POW 3 to the 7th power. And when we run this, it should give us two values, 1024 and then 2187. Okay. Now we can put it also into a variable and then print that variable. That's fine too. And as you can see, we sometimes work with larger or smaller number. So we wanted to think about the objective of our program again, how we are storing those values, and so that way we can retrieve it for later use. That's important to think about. So on page 9, it talks about how to use PAL method for exponent. Now, another way that we can use PAL is to have the third part of the parameter, which really indicates that it's x to the y mod z. So if we wanted to raise x to the y power and then mod z, we would include z as the third parameter in that method. So here I have print PAL 4 to 3. Simply that means that 4 to the second power and mod 3, which gives you 1. And when we do modulus, we simply apply division and the output would be the remainder from that division. So we would have 4 to the second power, which is 16 mod 3. So we would take 16 divided by 3. That would be quotient of 5 with the 1 remainder. So our output would be 1. Now to test this, we can do the same thing here. We would have print PAL, and we can say 5 to the third power mod 2, which is the third parameter, and we want to enclose the second brace to print. So when we run this, we would show that it is 1 for the third statement. So that would be 1. Next, I'm going to talk about square root. So in the lab, you would see that we don't require some of these methods. However, most of them you will see that it's required. So refer to the lab document, also the video, this video and the notes. That's going to help you. So for square root, we simply use the square root method, which is sqrt here with the parentheses. This one will require the math library, so you have to have import math at the top. That's required. Otherwise, it's going to throw an error. And since it's using the math library, when we're using the method, math dot, and then that method. So this allows you to return the value, the square root of that number. So when we do this, we can have import math, then we can print the square root of 81 as the example calls for, which gives us 9. Next, I'm going to talk about ranint. This is a built-in function for a random module in Python 3. And it returns an integer in a range. So if I wanted to randomly generate a number between 3 and 300, I can do so using ranint. All I have to do is specify where it's going to start and where it's going to end. So in this example, the first part of it is that we have R1 is a variable. And notice that at the top, we wanted to have import random. And import random allows us to use the built-in method. So as we import random, we have to use it in front of the method, random.ranint. That's how Python works. So R1 is going to store the randomly generated number between 0 and 10. Okay. So it's going to give us the random number between 0 and 10, and all of this is just a format of that. Next, the second part here is R2 is going to store the random generated integer between -10 and -1. So the range, or where that range, you have to specify inside the parameter here, the start and the end. You need to include the beginning and the end points using ranint. The third part of the example R3, we wanted to generate a random integer between -5 and 5. And so we can simply display that. So based on that example, here's the Python program in IDE. So what we'll go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and run this program. It tells me that I'm generating the number between 0 and 100 for R1, and that would be 67. Positive number. R2, we generated a random integer between -10 and -1. That gives us a -2. And third, we generated a random integer between -5 and 5. That will be 3. And yes, there's flexibility for you to change where you want to start and where you want it to end. So if I wanted between 10, I can do that. Or between 0 and 40, I can do that as well. Okay, and that will be now different than the prior, how we have the program previously. So as you can see, we can use ranint, which is a method that's built in Python, and this method requires that we use random library or module, so we have to import random in order for that to work. Next, I'm going to talk about range. This is also a built-in method using the random library in Python, so you need to have import random at the top. And this method returns randomly selected element from the range. Unlike ranint, we can have an increment on how it would step through for the random. So we would have a start, a stop, and the third parameter would be your step. That will be the incremented in the number to decide the random number. So in this program, we would start with import random, and we're using range to generate a random number between 100 and 1,000, and the step will be 2. So it's going to step through every 2 to generate the number. So here's my program, and as I run this, for the first part, I would have that when it goes from 0 to 100, I would have 75 is generated. Okay, as it would be range 100 here. Now, if I do a range from start is 50 to 100, it would generate a number between 50 and 100, so it gives me 55. Now, if we wanted to step every 5, then I can do a step 5. Between 50 to 100, it's going to give me 90. So this is different than if we don't do the step. So if we do the step, it's going to increment every 5 in order to determine the random value. Now, if we wanted to step every 10, that's going to be the increment every 10 to determine the random value. It's going to give me 80. And then lastly, if we go between -100 to 100, and we increment every 10, or we step every 10, it's going to give me 80. So as you can see, range, we have additional options on how we want it to step through to increment, to determine the random value in that range. The next part of the notes is arithmetic operators and operators in general. There are different operators that will be required for quiz and final exam, of course, and as you write different programs for this course, you will be required to implement or use arithmetic and other types of operators. So to start, we have arithmetic operators, and this is used for arithmetic operations, hence the name, like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, mod, etc. So to add, we simply use the plus sign. Like 2 plus 4 is going to give us 6. You can have the values that's stored in a variable to be added together. For subtraction operator, we would use the minus sign to subtract value, like 8 minus 2, that's going to give you 6. Multiplication, we use asterisk. Division, we use the slash, like 12 divided by 2 should give us 6. And then for mod, we would use the percentage symbol, and that's going to give us the remainder value after the division. So if we do 8 mod 3, it's simply take 8 divided by 3, which is going to give you quotient of 2 with the 2 remainders. So the output would be 2. The exponent operator, you can use the double asterisk to return exponent. So if I'm doing 4 to the second power, I can use the POW method, or in this case, I would use the operator using the double asterisk, which gives me 16. And if I wanted to do whole division, which uses 2 double slash, it returned the whole value after dividing the operands with the second. So if I take 7 divided by 2, I get 3 as a quotient with remainder, so it's only going to give you the quotient or the whole value after the division operation. And so for your lab and your quiz and exam, make sure that we understand how to use different types of operators, especially arithmetic operators, and you can find this in our notes on page 11. Similar to other languages, you have comparison operators. So the double equal sign means equal to, like 1 is equal to 1, and that's true. Not equal to, using exclamation point and the equal sign. Greater than, less than. So this is same as mathematic operators that you learn, and also in other languages. And we have greater or equal to, greater or less than or equal to. So as you can see, some example here. And for our control statement and if conditions, we will come back to this as we will do more example and practices with the if statement. So in the next week, we will touch back on this more. So I won't be able to cover this right now because your exercise doesn't require that. So control statement is in the next week. But you can preview that there in the notes. With the logical operators, similar to other languages, you have and, or, and not. So when you're using the and operator, both parts of the operands, the left and the right, must be true in order to have the true output. So x and y, so the x and y are true. If they're true, then your output will be true. The or, either part, the left or the right, is true, then your output would be true. So if x is true, then it would output true, but not y. If y is true and not x, then it's still going to give you true. So and requires that both parts needs to be true in order to output true, or only one, either side, can be true to have the output true. Not is the opposite. So if we say not x, it could be anything but x. So it's a complement of the operand. Then lastly, we have assignment operators, and you will find this in the assignment. I will have separate lab exercises. I won't have all of the lab exercises recorded, but I would show some of the example close to the lab exercise. So for assignment operators, it's very similar to other languages as well. We would use it to assign values to variables or identifiers. So we can have A is 5, which is a simple assignment, or we can use compound operators where we would use two symbols together to indicate that there are double operations in that assignment. So that means in this example, we have A plus equal 5, which adds 5 to the variable as it's assigned to A. So it literally means that A is A plus 5. And here is the list of your operators. We can have asterisk equal, slash equal for division, mod equal, and so forth. So that would be applied to your arithmetic operator and also assign value in concurrency, as we would have compound operators. And this would conclude week 1 notes. I highly encourage you to look through, try different examples, be able to install and write your program using a text editor and save it and be able to run it, as you would be required to write different programs throughout this course. I'm available for office hours if you have questions starting next week, week 1. And so if you have any questions, please send email or see me during office hours. Thank you for your time.